In a town where justice was just a word, a lone woman faced a trial that would unravel secrets long buried in dust and silence. From the moment Eliza stepped into the courthouse, her worn dress dusted with the dry earth of Hollow Creek, and no one at her side, it was clear to all that fairness had fled this place long ago. The saloon, usually alive with raucous laughter, emptied early that day. Even the gamblers, cards still warm in their hands, abandoned their tables, drawn by the scent of scandal and the promise of a spectacle. A woman on trial for murder, a servant, being it, poor, a find, was not just a crime. It was a story. It wasn't the act itself that pulled them in. It was who she was, or rather, who she wasn't. Eliza had no husband to vouch for her, no father to shield her name. She had no name anyone cared to recall. To the townsfolk, she was merely the girl from the mayor's house, or that quiet one with eyes that don't blink enough. For years, Eliza had toiled in the grand home of Mayor Amos Caldwell, a man whose wealth was matched only by his cruelty. Now he was dead. Poisoned, they claimed. And she was the only one in the room when he took his last breath. When they dragged her from that opulent house in chains, she didn't cry, didn't plead, didn't proclaim her innocence. She kept her head low, walked straight, and let the crowd spit and curse her name. In the courtroom, she sat on a hard bench beside a rusted iron stove, hands folded, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun that revealed fading bruises along her jaw. The prosecutor, a man with a preacher's fervor, paced the floor, clutching a small vial. "This," he bellowed, "is belladonna, the devil's herb. A single drop can kill a man in his sleep, and that's precisely what she did." The crowd hissed, murmured, and nodded. No one questioned why the poison was found in the mayor's own drawer. No one mentioned how he'd been weakening for months before that fatal night. No one asked what a servant girl, who didn't even own a decent pair of shoes, would gain by killing the only man who paid her wages. The judge, an old ally of the late mayor, watched with the detachment of a man torn between loyalty and duty, leaning heavily toward the former. Eliza's court-appointed attorney, a nervous man named Mr. Harrow, barely spoke. He wiped his sweaty brow, cleared his throat, and finally stood. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I don't believe there's any real proof," he mumbled. "That's all," the judge snapped, cutting him off. "You may sit down." A few in the crowd chuckled. Eliza's eyes scanned the room slowly, not seeking help, just observing how quickly kindness turned to cruelty when people had nothing at stake. An old baker woman averted her gaze. A stable boy who once smiled at her now looked away. The sheriff, who had once asked if she needed protection from her employer, stood by the door, as if she were already condemned. The jury didn't deliberate long. They didn't need to. Everyone had their version of the truth, and none included mercy for Eliza. As the gavel slammed down and the judge called for a break before sentencing, she was led through a back hallway. She didn't resist. Across town, in the dim shadows of the near-empty saloon, a man with gray dust on his coat and a revolver heavy on his hip sat untouched whiskey before him. He'd been there since dawn. When the gavel's echo reached the wooden buildings of Hollow Creek, he stood. They called it justice, but to him, it felt like a performance. When the trial resumed after a brief recess, the townsfolk returned with renewed vigor. Some clutched fans, others snacks, as if they were at a theater in a bigger city. Eliza was led back into the courtroom, her chains clinking like wind chimes in a storm. Her face was pale, unreadable. She hadn't spoken since her arrest. The prosecutor leaned into his role, stoking the flames of outrage. He spun tales of a bitter servant, scorned by a master who tolerated her out of Christian charity. He painted her as jealous, secretive, resentful, a woman who listened too much and spoke too little. "She never even cried at the mayor's death," he declared, voice rising. "What kind of woman doesn't weep when her employer dies in her arms. Someone in the back whispered, "A guilty one." No one questioned how a woman earning $2 a week could afford poison. No one asked why Mayor Caldwell's will had been hastily rewritten the week before, leaving nothing to his estranged sons and everything to a mysterious beneficiary whose name remained undisclosed. Mr. Harrow, the defense attorney, offered little resistance. His voice, when it emerged, was apologetic, almost embarrassed. "There's no direct proof," he said faintly. "Perhaps we should consider it could have been a mistake. Maybe a heart condition." "Sit down, Mr. Harrow," the judge interrupted. "We've heard enough speculation." Eliza didn't flinch. She had grown accustomed to silence. When she was 8, her mother died in childbirth. By 12, her father had drunk himself into the grave. Life taught her to vanish, walk softly, speak less, smile only when expected. She'd lived in 5 homes before landing in Caldwell's mansion, each more unkind than the last. The mayor was no exception. His kindness was a veneer, masking poison. He called her a girl no matter how many years passed. His hands lingered where they shouldn't. He struck her once for breaking a porcelain dish, then paid her extra the next day, claiming it was for her troubles. In private, he was a menace. In public, he was a saint, making her the flirt. She'd considered fleeing, but to where? Who would believe a servant girl's word against a man like Amos Caldwell? The judge cleared his throat, his tired eyes signaling he just wanted this over. "Unless there are any final witnesses," he began. The room stilled. The doors creaked, but no one entered. "Not yet." The judge nodded. "Then this court finds the defendant." Before he could finish, the courthouse doors burst open. A panting stable boy, hatless and shirt soaked with sweat, stumbled in, clutching a crumpled letter. I found this," he shouted, holding it aloft. "It's from the mayor. Found it in his desk drawer, tucked behind the lining." Gasps filled the room. The judge waved the bailiff forward. The letter was snatched and handed up. The courtroom held its breath as the judge read in silence, then folded the letter and set it down. "It changes nothing," he said coldly. "The letter is unsigned and unverified. We proceed." Hope vanished. Eliza didn't look up. She had learned long ago that truth was unwelcome in rooms like this. As dusk settled over Hollow Creek, the courtroom emptied. The trial adjourned for the night, but no one expected surprises come morning. Eliza, still nameless to most, would be declared guilty, sentenced, and forgotten. The town had already moved on to whupper and gossip. She was returned to a narrow holding cell behind the sheriff's office. The cot smelled of mildew, the stone walls cold. A small slit above eye level served as the only window, barely enough to glimpse the sky. Yet she sat upright, hands folded, back straight. No one visited. No one brought food. Even the sheriff, who once tipped his hat to her, avoided her gaze. His deputy, a young redhead still green, watched her from a distance, as if she were a caged beast that might lunge. She didn't lunge. She didn't see. She waited. In town, conversations swirled without her. At the saloon, over whiskey and laughter, regulars echoed the prosecutor's words with certainty. At the church, they prayed for justice, though whether that meant punishment or mercy no one clarified. At the Caldwell house, the mayor's sons gathered to discuss their inheritance. No one spoke for Eliza, not the housemaid who saw her bruises, not the cook who heard the arguments, not the doctor who treated the mayor's failing heart, but stayed silent. When asked to testify, they all had something to lose, or so they told themselves. Their jobs, their peace, their place in a town that valued silence over truth. But Eliza had nothing left to lose. In her cell, she remembered every night she went to bed hungry while the mayor dined with guests. Every morning, She scrubbed floors only to be told she'd missed a spot. Every time she flinched at footsteps behind her, too scared to turn. She had accepted that Hollow Creek would never remember her kindness, only the rumor of her crime. Just before midnight, the sheriff's office door creaked open. Heavy, deliberate boots sounded. The deputy stood, hand on his holster. A figure stepped in. Dusty coat, low-brimmed hat, revolver resting easy on his hip. "Can I help you?" the deputy asked, voice cracking. The man didn't answer. He walked to the cell and stopped a few feet away. Eliza looked up, her eyes narrowing. Recognition flickered, but only for a moment. He tipped his hat. "Evening," he said, voice like gravel soaked in whiskey. "Didn't expect to find you behind bars." She said nothing. "I came for answers," he added, "but seems I came for something more." The deputy cleared his throat. "Sir, visiting hours?" The man turned his head. The deputy froze. Silence returned. The stranger looked back at Eliza and spoke softly. "I'll be at the saloon come morning. If you want out of this, I suggest you wait." He turned and left, the door swinging behind him. Eliza didn't sleep that night. Not from fear of what was coming, but because for the first time, someone had entered her silence and lingered. By sunrise, whispers spread through Hollow Creek like morning mist. "He's back," murmured the bartender, wiping the same glass thrice. "Didn't think I'd ever see that bastard again." "Who?" asked the piano player, hands frozen above the keys. The bartender leaned in, voice low. "Jasper Kane." The name sent a chill through the saloon. Jasper Kane wasn't just a man. He was a legend. The kind mothers warned their sons about when they dreamed of joining posses or chasing outlaws. Once the fastest draw west of the Black Hills, a bounty hunter, a drifter, a shadow. He'd vanished years ago. Some said he was dead, others that he'd gone mad. A few swore he'd ridden into a storm and dissolved like smoke. Now he was back, sitting in the saloon's corner, hat low, nursing a cold coffee. The townsfolk kept their distance. Even the sheriff, passing by, pretended not to notice the revolver at Jasper's side, or the way his eyes tracked everything without moving. No one approached. No one dared, except the old pianist. He shuffled to the corner, hands trembling just enough to betray his nerves. "You here for her?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. Jasper didn't look up. "I'm here because I owe a debt." The pianist nodded, though he didn't understand. "Folks say she did it." "Folks say a lot of things," Jasper replied, calm and low. "She ain't said a word in her own defense." "That's 'cause nobody listened when she did." The old man glanced around, wary of eavesdroppers. "You planning to speak for her?" Jasper lifted his eyes. Cold, clear, certain. "I plan to make this town remember what happens when it forgets who it used to be." At the sheriff's office, Eliza stood by the barred window, arms folded. She hadn't been told about the stranger's visit, but she remembered his voice, his silence, and something deeper. An echo of a life she might have had if fate had been kinder. She recalled a name, not his, but one she'd overheard years ago through the walls of Caldwell's study. "Jasper Kane is a necessary evil," the mayor had growled. "He kills, but he doesn't steal. He protects, but only if paid in blood." That name had lingered in her mind, tied to a man Caldwell once hired to intimidate a rival. A man who vanished after one bloody night and no one dared mention. Now he sat nearby, waiting. The town tailor turned his shop sign to "closed." The baker burned the morning loaves, distracted by the stranger in the dark coat, walking toward the square. At the saloon, the bartender poured drinks with a trembling hand. Hollow Creek had declared Eliza's guilt before a verdict was read. But now, a buried name had resurfaced, carrying its own judgment. The sun climbed, but the town's usual bustle slowed to a cautious crawl. The saloon, typically lively by midday, sat hushed, as if Hollow Creek held its breath. Only the swinging doors creaked as people peeked in, saw Jasper, and left quietly. Jasper hadn't moved since dawn. In a far booth, his hat shadowed his face, hands resting atop the table. Near, but not too near, his revolver. He hadn't ordered another drink, hadn't eaten, just waited. The piano stayed silent. The bartender polished already clean glasses. Occasionally, someone entered, curious, brave, or foolish, and froze at the sight of him. A few whispered his name, only to be silenced by glares from those who knew his reputation. By noon, the sheriff stepped inside, shoulders stiff beneath his badge, trying to project authority. "Kane," he said with a nod. Jasper didn't respond. "You passing through?" Silence. The sheriff cleared his throat. "We don't want trouble." "Then stop making it," Jasper replied, low and even. The sheriff shifted. "If this is about the girl, it is. She was tried fair and square." Jasper looked up, eyes sharp. "Nothing about this town is fair, least of all that courtroom." The sheriff opened his mouth, then closed it. He wasn't cruel, just tired, worn by years of looking away. And Jasper Kane wasn't a ghost you argued with. "I ain't here to break your law," Jasper said, voice like steel drawn slow. "Just here to remind it." The sheriff nodded once and left, tension trailing like smoke. In her cell, Eliza sat, head bowed. She heard the whispers through the walls, the way voices quavered when they said his name. She recalled how Caldwell spoke of Jasper Kane as a weapon he once wielded but couldn't control. She remembered a night years ago when Caldwell shouted at her for asking too many questions. Jasper had been there, gallant as always. After that, the shouting stopped for weeks. Then one morning, Jasper was gone. Now he was back. The town didn't know what to do with him. Too dangerous to provoke, too mysterious to trust, too quainted to dismiss. He didn't threaten, didn't raise his voice, but his stillness unnerved everyone. Even the air seemed to shy away from him. As the courthouse bell rang 1 o'clock, the saloon doors swung wide. The room stiffened. Jasper stood, every eye following as he walked slowly to the door, spurs barely sounding on the wooden floor. He paused, then turned to the room. "Today, you'll all watch a woman hang for something she didn't do," he said, "and not one of you lifted a hand." No one answered. He didn't wait for a reply. He walked out, and a silence deeper than gunfire settled over Hollow Creek. The courthouse filled early. Men removed their hats, women clutched shawls, children dragged by curiosity were hushed. The trial had ended the previous day. Only sentencing remained. The judge sat high, robes pressed, voice rehearsed, a Bible on his bench, unopened in years. The jury had delivered their guilty verdict before supper the night before. Now, the town awaited the formal sealing of a fate they'd already accepted. Eliza was led in, still chained, still silent, wearing the same worn dress from her arrest, now loose on her frame. Her cheeks were hollow, eyes darkened by sleepless nights. She looked less like a criminal and more like a shadow struggling to be seen. She was told to stand. She did. "Do you have any final words?" the judge asked, more from protocol than care. She shook her head. The judge began his sentence, words heavy with legal flourish and biblical nods, as if poetry could hide the ugliness. He spoke of justice, the sanctity of life, how the court took no pleasure in such decisions. Then the door opened. The heavy creak stole every eye. Footsteps followed, slow, deliberate, echoing like distant thunder. Jasper Kane stepped inside. The judge paused mid-sentence. The sheriff rose halfway, then saw it. Eliza didn't turn. She didn't need to. She knew. Jasper walked down the center aisle. No one dared stop him. No one whispered his name. He reached the front and stood just behind her. The judge cleared his throat, trying to regain rhythm. This court finds the defendant guilty. She's my wife, Jasper said. The words struck like a hammer on stone. Gasps swept the room. A child whimpered. Someone whispered, "That can't be true." The judge narrowed his eyes. "What did you say?" Jasper's voice stayed even. "I said she's my wife." "You're interrupting official court business." "I'm correcting it." The judge tried to assert control. "This is a court of law, sir, not a saloon for storytelling." "Then let the truth speak," Jasper said. He reached into his coat slowly, carefully, and pulled a folded paper. "Marriage license filed in Dust Creek, 3 towns over, 2 years ago." The sheriff, pale and sweating, took the document, read it once, then twice. He looked at Eliza. She showed no emotion, only blinked. The judge scoffed. "Even if this is true, and I doubt it, it has no bearing on her guilt." "It has bearing on why she was left alone," Jasper answered. "Why no one stood beside her." "'Cause no one knew." He turned to the crowd. "You watched her suffer, and you did nothing." No one met his gaze. The judge, flustered, slammed the gavel. "This is highly irregular." Jasper stepped closer to Eliza and said quietly, "You're not alone anymore." For the first time in the trial, her hands shook. She wasn't crying, but something in her stillness cracked. Not broken, just opened. For several seconds, the courtroom froze. The gavel rested crooked on the judge's bench, unused since Jasper spoke. The sheriff held the marriage license like it might agape. The jury, so certain hours ago, now stared at Eliza as if seeing her anew. She remained quiet, but her stillness had shifted. No longer the quiet of abandonment, but of protection. The judge leaned forward, trying to regain control. "Even if this marriage is valid, it doesn't absolve her of murder. This trial is about justice, not romance." Jasper stepped forward. Just once, it was enough. "I'm not here for romance," he said. "I'm here because you late. All of you." Murmurs rippled across the benches. "She begged for help before the mayor died," Jasper said. "I was there. I heard her. I saw the bruises, how he kept her working through fever, through injury. I left because I couldn't kill a man for something the law should have stopped." He looked around, voice low and sharp. "But you never stopped it. You watched. You gossiped. And now you call yourselves just." The judge's face reddened. "You're not an officer of this court. You have no authority here." "I don't need authority," Jasper replied. "I have truth." He turned to the sheriff. "You remember that cut on her lip? You saw it. You asked if she wanted to press charges." The sheriff swallowed hard and nodded slowly. "She said no. Said it'd only make things worse." "She was right," Jasper added. "Because it would." The judge tried to interrupt, but Jasper spoke first. "I came back not to rescue her, but to remind you what you buried." He pulled another paper from his coat, an old medical report signed by the town doctor, detailing bruises, a broken rib, internal bleeding from a year prior. More gasps. The document passed hand to hand, reaching the judge, who read in silence. "She wasn't angry," Jasper said. "She was surviving." He turned to Eliza. "Not the town, not the court, just her. You wanted to disappear so bad. You forgot you mattered." She looked up, eyes locking with his. "I left because I thought it was better to disappear than stay and burn everything down. I was wrong." The courtroom held its breath. Then a voice rose from the back, thin, shaky mice. "I saw the mayor hit her," said the baker's wife. Heads turned. "He used to make her kneel while he drank," she added, now crying. "I never said anything." The housemaid stood. "She cleaned his chamber pot when she had a fever. I begged him to let her rest." He laughed. The old piano man spoke. "I saw bruises on her arms 2 years ago. I thought it wasn't my place." Whispers of guilt and shame grew louder than any gavel could silence. The judge sat back, expression hollow. The truth was heavier than the sentence he'd prepared. Jasper didn't need to say more. He'd won. Not through violence, but through silence finally broken. The courthouse emptied slowly. No verdict was read that day. No sentence delivered. The judge, once proud, paused and announced a recess, pending review of new evidence and witness accounts. His voice cracked, as if he no longer believed in the courtroom he led. Eliza was taken back to her cell, but without shackles. The deputy who led her kept his head down, hands trembling as he opened the iron door. She didn't ask questions. She sat quietly. Across town, Jasper stood at the square's edge, staring into the distance. He didn't return to the saloon, didn't seek food or rest. He waited. As he stood, people passed, some pausing, unsure whether to thank him, others pretending not to see him. By nightfall, the doctor arrived at the sheriff's office, a file in hand, guilt etched on his face. "I lied by omission," he confessed. "I treated her more than once and never filed the proper records. I feared the mayor's wrath more than I feared God." The sheriff, voice quieter than usual, said, "You're not the only one." The next morning, Hollow Creek was different. No one said it aloud, but Jasper Kane's name carried weight again, not as an outlaw or killer, but as something worse for the town, a mirror reflecting what they'd ignored. Jasper sat outside the jailhouse, hat low, as people whispered his name, not with fear, but unease. It wasn't his gun they feared now. It was what he knew. Inside, Eliza's thoughts raced. She recalled the first time she heard Jasper's name, whispered by Caldwell during a heated argument with a rival. "I'll bring Kane back if you don't shut your mouth," he'd threatened, like summoning a demon. Later, the staff spoke of Jasper with awe and fear. A man who did what was needed, but only if it was right. A gun for hire with his own code. She'd seen him only a few times. Quiet, watchful. A man who never looked at her like she was invisible. Then he vanished. Now he was back, claiming her as his wife. She didn't understand why. Didn't know if it was true. But part of her, the part that hadn't dared feel in years, wanted to believe someone had seen her long before the courtroom did. The sheriff approached Jasper. "Judge has called for the case to be reopened," he said. "With proper testimony, witnesses." Jasper didn't move. Too little, too late. "Maybe," the sheriff said, "but maybe not for her." Jasper looked up. The sheriff hesitated, then added, "You really married her?" Jasper shrugged. "Doesn't matter." "Matters to some of us." Jasper stood. "Let the town do what it needs to. But make sure when it's done, she walks free. And you. I'll be gone by then." The sheriff didn't stop him, just nodded as Jasper turned away. A voice rose behind him, small but steady. "She deserves more than freedom." Jasper turned. The piano man stood in the square, old and bent, but eyes clear. "She deserves a place, a name, something that lasts longer than shame." Jasper tipped his hat. "Then maybe it's time Hollow Creek remembered who it used to be." The trial's reopening was announced by the church bell, not by law, but by the people's will. No official decree, no posted notice, yet the town came. They came because they'd seen truth, not loud or threatening, but steady, staring back with hollow eyes and bruised wrists. They came because Eliza no longer felt like a stranger, but someone they'd failed. The church opened its doors, the courthouse no longer trusted. Pews filled slowly, first the baker and his wife, then the housemaid, the cook, the piano man, the stable boy, each taking a place as if to say, "We were wrong." Jasper didn't sit. He stood at the back, arms crossed, watching. Eliza entered with the sheriff. No chains, no bowed head. Her steps were cautious, but her spine was straight. When she sat on the witness bench, something shifted. She spoke for the first time since her arrest. "I didn't kill him," she said, voice soft but firm. "I wanted to many times, but I didn't." She looked around, not with anger, but a sadness that made grown men shift uncomfortably. "I begged for help. I prayed. I stayed silent because I thought it would keep me safe." She turned to the judge, now seated without robes, a man like any other. It didn't. One by one, and the townsfolk came forward. The maid testified to the mayor's temper. The cook spoke of nights Eliza went without food. The stable boy confirmed he'd seen the mayor strike her more than once. Even the judge, shamed by what he'd allowed, admitted he'd heard rumors, but never asked questions. By day's end, no verdict was read aloud. There was no need. Truth had returned, not in fury, but in faith, in the belief that redemption, though slow, still had a place in the West. Outside, the sun dipped low. Jasper waited at the town's edge, horse saddled, coat over one shoulder. Eliza found him there. "I don't remember marrying you," she said plainly. "You didn't," he answered. She blinked. "The papers are real, but they were never filed." "Why bring them?" "Because they'd believe me. Before they'd believe you." She studied him. "So you lied for me?" "No," he said. "I lied with you." A breeze caught her dress's hem. "You can stay," he added. She hesitated. "And be your wife?" "You don't owe me that," he said. "You don't owe me anything." He turned to mount, but she stopped him with one word. "Wait." He paused. "I don't want to stay in Hollow Creek," she said, "but I don't want to walk alone anymore." He met her gaze, and for the first time in years, she saw something in a man's eyes that asked nothing, only offered a place to rest. She stepped forward. He offered his hand. Together they turned from the town that had called her nothing. They didn't ride far, just enough for Hollow Creek to fade behind them, swallowed by dust and the setting sun. No destination spoken, no plans laid, just two souls moving forward, quietly, steadily, without chains. At dusk they stopped at a roadside inn beyond the ridge. A wooden sign creaked in the wind, its faded letters reading Grace's Rest. Inside, the tavern was nearly empty, a single lantern casting an amber glow. An old woman behind the counter looked up, her sharp eyes softening when she saw Eliza's face. "Room's yours if you want it," she said. "No questions." Jasper nodded and mowed. They sat near the fire, not close, but not intimate. He ordered food, simple stew and cornbread. Eliza hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd eaten a real meal. Not since before the arrest. Maybe not even before that. She sat, hands folded, until the food arrived, then slowly reached for the spoon. Jasper didn't watch. He just ate. No words, no questions, no expectations. When she finished half her bowl, he glanced over. "Want the rest?" She shook her head. "No, thank you." He pushed his bowl toward her anyway. She hesitated, then took a bite. In that small gesture, something unspoken past a truce, a beginning. Not love, not yet. Maybe not ever. But something solid. Something true. She set down the spoon and leaned back. "You really were going to leave after the trial," she said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I didn't think you'd want a reminder of that place." She studied him in the firelight. "Maybe I don't, but I do want something to look forward to." Jasper didn't smile. He rarely did. But his eyes softened. "What do you want?" She looked at her hands, once steady, now trembling just enough to feel real. "A place I can walk into without hearing whispers," she said. "A name I can speak without shame." He nodded. "And a table," she added. That made him pause. A table. One where someone saves me a seat, where I don't have to earn it. Jasper reached across, not to touch her, but to straighten the crooked spoon. Then we'll build that, he said. No promises, no vows, just truth. The old woman brought tea without asking. She'd seen many travelers, but few with eyes so tired and quiet. As the fire crackled low, Eliza looked out the window. The stars had emerged. She wasn't anyone's servant anymore, not the girl with no name. She was someone who'd stood trial alone and walked away with someone who saw her, not as broken, but as beginning. That night, in a place called Grace's Rest, two souls shared a table built not from wood or trees, but from silence, survival, and something that might one day be called love. Sometimes, all a person needs is someone to say, "You're not alone."